And something I love about this movie is they let Jesse's character be mature enough to bounce ideas back and forth with an adult.
I think that so often we can have this patronizing attitude towards children. Like there's some completely different species, but it is a really valuable thing to realize that they are just small people. And when we become aware of that, we can look at them as we would look at a mirror. Sometimes we behave in ways that we don't understand. Sometimes kids behave in ways that they don't understand. They can be frustrating. We can be frustrating. And when we see that, I think it can teach us to give more grace to kids, to the adults in our lives, to ourselves.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Dodge this.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Holy Moment Podcast, where we watch films with you and discuss the moments that work, the moments that do not, and the moments that reflect truth in unexpected ways. This Monday, well, at least it's Monday for me right now, may not be for you, sucks for you. I'm talking with my absolutely lovely co-hosts, Nathaniel Lirio.
Hello, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lirio. I'm a writer, director, and editor in the film industry, and I'm excited to be here today talking about this movie. I'm happy that I'm feeling better and looking better than Jeffrey as he's dying over there.
Hey guys, I'm Jeffrey. I'm being slowly consumed by my allergies, and very soon, I'll probably be dead. Perhaps even by the end of this podcast. Who knows? Keep me in your thoughts, people.
If you die on this podcast, we'll use it for clout to get more clicks.
It's exactly what I would want.
Good. We're good friends.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
Don't look at me.
You're like the monster.
yeah, before I even tell you guys what we watched this week, y'all ever watch SpongeBob? Maybe if you were like, your mom was really religious or just like cool, but like in a smart way, then maybe like she didn't let you watch that. But I think Jeffrey is kind of giving the really like has suds SpongeBob right now.
Suds.
I don't know what episode that's from. I don't know what season that's from, but I think it was pretty early on into the series.
I watched some SpongeBob, but like most mothers, my mother said it would rot my brain. So I only watched it when I was at my grandma's house. And then when I got an iPod, I would save money and then buy singular episodes on iTunes and download them onto my iPod. So I had like the first 2 seasons at some point in middle school. But I don't remember Suds specifically. What did this person do?
Suds? Oh, it's just SpongeBob and he gets sick.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yep.
And then he like plugs himself with a bunch of like corks. And then there is a really freaky moment with Patrick. And by that I mean, well, you just got to watch it. I think you just kind of have to.
What I'm hearing
sit
is
down,
next episode we're going to review this episode of SpongeBob.
That I think that's what just has to happen. We're breaking form. we're just breaking form, and we're watching the episodes Suds from season 1 of SpongeBob SquarePants.
This is becoming a SpongeBob podcast, guys.
Oh, not even an episode, the whole podcast.
I mean, maybe we'll have Tom Kenny. That'd be cool.
Oh, that would be cool. It's no longer the Holy Moment podcast. We're now the Holy Sponge podcast.
He gives his like really down to earth thoughts on every single episode of SpongeBob, and we can't move on from from the podcast or talk about any other movie until we finish the entire series.
That would in fact last our life. I don't even. Do you know what season they're on? Something stupid, right?
I don't know.
Fact check.
I'll look it up. Fact check. Yeah, that's what they call me at work. SpongeBob. How many episodes? I don't think it's that many. I think it would like be more effed if we watched like
One Piece.
One Piece. Yeah. Yeah. It's only 303. The Simpsons is at 677.
303. That literally seems like a lie. Are you sure they call you fact check at work?
Well, my coworker and my boss do. The 2 out of 3 of the people who I work with.
All right. We'll let it slide.
Might be 305, but something like that. Anyways, to get back to it. This week we watched a movie called, guess what, guys? Does anyone know what it's called? It's called Come On, Come On. Come On, comma, Come On. The movie Come On, Come On came out November 24th, 2021. It was released by the studio A24. It was directed by the one, the only Mike Mills. Do you know who that is? I didn't either. I had to go to Letterboxd to see what else he had worked on, and he also directed the movie 20th Century Woman. And two other ones that I don't really know, but they seem to be somewhat popular beginners, and Thumbsucker. The budget for this movie was $1.3 million and made about 4.4 in the box office. And we were graced with the wonderful, the cool, the indie Joaquin Phoenix as Johnny. As the child, we had a actor named Woody Norman, who was in this movie that Nathaniel watched, that he said he watched last summer.
Ooh, the Voyage of the Demeter, the vampire one. It was great. No spoilers, but the boy dies. It was awesome.
No spoilers, but the boy dies.
Yeah, it's fine. It's good.
It's hilarious.
No spoilers.
And we had Gabi Hoffman as Viva.
Also, not to fact check the fact checker, unless I misheard you, did you say 1.3 million for the budget?
I think I said 8.3.
Oh, okay. So either
maybe I read it as 1.3.
So either you can't read or I can't hear, but it is 8.3 million for the budget. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Host.
All right. If you want to know what awards this got, Google is free. This is not a facts thing, even though I call myself fact checker. But just to give you guys a little bit overview of the movie, in case you haven't watched it, which you really should before you continue listening to this episode. Come On, Come On is in my opinion, I think it's a very like raw, almost like contemplative, sort of like not quite a road trip in the general sense of like a movie that like Where the Millers might be, but something like a indie art house version of that maybe. That we follow Joaquin's character Johnny, who is this radio journalist kind of guy, and then he has to just begin caring for his really, really interesting, probably should be going to therapy nephew, Jessie. He's played by Woody Norman. And then we see as their relationship progresses throughout them spending time together, and then we watch as they go through these different cities and they collect these different kids' reflections on various things that they interview them about. Cool fun fact that should I have figured it out? Yeah, did I know that my co-hosts before we started mentioned is that all those interviews, as much as my co-hosts say that's a little bit fishy, they were apparently real. They were just like them being interviewed normally and just taking the like not the proper, but the cream of the crop of what they said.
You know what that means? If you take issues with any of these kids' answers, their full name is in fact in the cast credit, and you can track them down and you can be like, what do you mean this is the future? So do with that what you want.
I hope you do nothing with that.
But if you do, you cannot blame me. This is not me talk, Nathaniel. This was Jeffrey.
All right. I'm Nathaniel then. I say we should, I don't know, firebomb a third world country, I guess.
Good thing we have this on video. Jeffrey, how could you say this?
Jeffrey's talking like we're not like number one in terms of just having that kind of fun. Large asterisks, I don't think that's fun at all. I just think that's something that America partakes in already. So
we'll blame it on his allergies. They're making him delusional. Jeffrey, you're not a nom anymore.
The
lives in Germany.
mucus has, it's so stuffed up that it's like pushed into my brain, and
yeah, it's pressing on that like impulse drive that you always have to hold back on every day.
Yeah.
All right, to our audience at home, the Germany comment wasn't like weird. It's just canon to Jeffrey's lore. Anyways, just a little bit more about the movie. The movie was shot in black and white. I think it really worked for it. My co-host may disagree. I really loved it. I ate that up. And it's a really quiet, like reflection on, I think, family, imperfection, and the unfiltered honesty of childhood. So my first question I think that I have for my co-host today is that if you could sit with anyone you've ever known, or just like someone that you really do love in your life for the duration of like a typical interview, so anywhere between like 45 minutes to like say at the longest like 2 hours and 30 minutes, who would you sit with? Who would you choose to just sit there, recorder, and just talk to them? And what would you ask and why?
Oh, that's a good question. My senior year of high school, they asked us a very similar question for our like they did like senior spotlight like once a week or once a month or something. They would they like gathered a bunch of quotes from the seniors and took a picture and would put it in the high school paper. And one of them was like, if you could sit with anyone you've ever known or anyone who was existed in history, who would it be and why? I'm not going to give my answer because it was super cringy, but if I could interview anyone, oh shoot, does that have to be so? It has to be someone I have personally known.
You could take it that direction. You could take it the direction of someone you personally know, and like you would just sit with them for, or like someone you knew and you didn't like, say it's like a grandparent and then you just didn't like you were like maybe 7 and they passed away.
Okay.
So if you just want to sit with them now, you're 20 something.
Yeah.
And you could sit with them for 2.5 hours, ask them whatever you wanted, and they'd answer.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Okay, cool. Then I'm going to cheat just a little bit. So I'm going to say my fiance's mother passed away when she was relatively younger, and I never met her. So if I had the opportunity, because also I'm just very thankful, like none of my parents, none of my grandparents, I don't have anyone that I personally know, besides like great grandparents that have passed away in my life. So I'm very thankful that like, everyone that I love is still around. But I think it would be really interesting, this idea, especially that's like as you go through seasons of life, and the season of like walking towards marriage sooner and sooner for me, it would be really interesting to get to interview and talk to the woman that really helped kind of create the woman that I'm going to marry. And also it could be a really cool thing. Like you said, Vega, if it's an interview and we get to record it, it would be a really nice thing to, present to my fiance and be like, hey, here's somehow your mother from the grave. So I would pick that. And then I guess just the questions I would ask, they would mostly be like around my fiance and like, hey, how was it raising her? What were like the what was some good parenting advice? And then I would also ask her like, hey, what advice do you have for us going into marriage? And we're not going to be around. You're not going to be around to ask those questions now. So yeah, that's my answer.
Mine would be my grandma, who passed away 1 or 2 summers ago. I actually lived with her for the latter years of my college experience, and I still live in the house that we shared. But I always felt that me being very reserved and very introverted and needing my own space, I always felt that I was lacking as a grandchild, because I didn't make as much intentional time with her as I wish that I had. And so being able to interview her and really do a deep dive on her life and be able to ask questions, if it was like a sure thing that she would be vulnerable with me, I would ask questions that perhaps there are a lot of deep questions that I feel like I could have asked her that she would not have answered, or at least she would have given a very sanitized version of it. She's a very Christian lady, but in her youth, she wasn't. In fact, she met my grandpa at a nightclub called the It'll Do nightclub in Houston, Texas, which is still there. But being able to mine her brain for just her experiences of youth and the mistakes and the lessons and what it was really like to be with my grandpa, who was apparently not a very kind man. I don't know, and just I'd love to have a very frank conversation about what it was like raising my dad, and the struggles it came with.
I like that pick. I like the idea of like, if this is a conversation that they'll be vulnerable with, asking those questions that are uncomfortable. That's good. But what about you, Mr. Host? Who would you sit down with?
To ask a question like that, I should have given it a little bit more thought, because there's people who are still in my life who I could still talk to. So there's not a whole lot of people who maybe have either left my life for reasons they couldn't control, such as they passed away, or that they left my life out of like choice. I think this is definitely a toughie.
If it's not me, our friendship is over.
I would like the audience to know that we talk so often. We call a good bit, and we just talk about life and a lot about the podcast, but we also do talk about life.
I don't know what he's talking about. I don't even know who he is. Out of this podcast, never talked to this man.
I think we just met online.
Yeah.
Letterboxd comments for life.
Oh, bro, that would be a funny podcast concept. Just like meeting people on like Letterboxd, like the most random apps, like just the most like no Facebook, no Instagram, like really weird, obscure social media, and like do podcasts with them. Anyways, I'm not trying to distract us from the point. Yeah, who would you interview?
Yeah, not to give a really cheap answer. Okay, there's technically two answers that I have, but one of them I don't feel maybe not appropriate in like some sort of crude way to mention. Just I don't think I'm gonna mention them on this. But the second person I would probably interview would be, well, okay, this would be under the guise that I have the ability to talk another language and that they would still be in this idea, probably alive, because I don't know if they are or not. But I really would love to sit down with my grandfather on my mother's side. For any listeners at home or, in your car or wherever you may be, my grandfather on my mother's side didn't really come into any of my family's life until I believe it was 2007, 2008. From maybe like age a couple years old ish till my mom was whatever age she would have been in 2007. She didn't know who really he was outside of like a picture that I have on near my bedside and like a letter. But through a series of events, we were able to get back in contact, and my mom was able to see him, and then he was able to come to the States a few times, and we were able to visit him in Japan. But I just was so fascinated when we went to go visit him in Japan. Not as much because it's like, oh, this is not in like some sort of weird weeb way of like, oh, this culture is so awesome, or this is so whatever. None of that, as much as there have been other family members in my life, and this isn't a dig at them, who have the ability to be physically present with me, but have just don't. But in the little amount of time that I was able to know him, and even through like double language barrier, because he didn't speak English, but he did speak kind of like a broken Spanish. So like from him to my mother or father, and then to me, just so deeply and genuinely did love me and my siblings and my family. So I don't know if this may just break the rules of the very premise that I asked, but I would just ask him quite literally to give me a play-by-play of his entire life up until when I was sitting there with him. I would love to hear every single thing that he would have to say about his experiences, about his life, and how fascinating it was. And I know he wasn't a perfect man by any stretch of the imagination, but I did feel very loved in the amount of time, and even in this particular situation, I was able to know my grandfather.
That would be an interview. I've heard a little bit of the backstory of what Vega's talking about now, and that's definitely an interview I would love to be a fly on the wall for and just listen to. I'm sure it'd be super fascinating.
Probably sob like a baby. I'd kill to sit just at his like dinner table again and just go through all of his photo albums, because he'd been everywhere. If he's still alive, then he's lived such a full life. Anywho,
Before,
all of that aside, do it.
I was gonna say, before we move on, I just wanted to give an invitation to our audience. Anyone listening out there, hit us up, DM us on Instagram at The Holy Moment Podcast, or send us an email at theholymomentpodcast@gmail.com, and let us know who, maybe in general, anyone in the world, like anyone you've ever known, you could interview, but then specifically in film. What actor, writer, director, maybe if you're really into cinematography, what like DP, just who would you want to sit down and interview for a good duration? Yeah, let us know. And well, maybe if you send us an email or DM us, we'll kind of look at those next week, and maybe we can read them if you guys are comfortable with that.
Maybe I'm a little bit of a sappy person. I think that sounds really lovely and tender. All of our combined sappiness or emotions aside, how did y'all feel? Just first impressions out of the gate. How did you guys feel about the movie? Come on.
First impressions out the gate. I would say it's beautifully authentic, and I'm a bit conflicted as the viewer, I would say, is kind of my immediate reaction. So a little bit of the duality of like, this was so beautifully authentic with the acting and the premise, and I'm a little bit conflicted as far as, did I enjoy it or did I not enjoy it? What does it mean? And if you guys listened to the last maybe few episodes, we've kind of been slowly dissecting this idea, at least for me. What does it mean to be entertained by a movie? Is there a certain, is it different for everyone? Is there something important that we should all be looking for in films? Should you be like, is the number one priority to be entertained? So ever since Vega brought this up maybe 2-3 weeks ago, I've really been trying to pay attention. Like, is it more important to be entertained by a movie than for the movie to be good, than for the movie to say something? So that's kind of something I'm interested to talk about today. Just that conundrum I kind of have, and we'll get into it with My Holy Moment, because My Holy Moment kind of tackles this concept of like, is it good even though maybe I wasn't entertained, so on and so forth. But yeah, regardless of the entertainment value, it was beautifully authentic for sure.
Yeah, I would say the movie is slow going. It's not very heavily plotted, but it doesn't need to be. And I think that the professional actors brought a lot to the film and making it feel authentic. But the real interviews uh, interspersed throughout also added a lot to me. So I mean, that was my impression. I think that some of the themes that the movie explores, and the intertwining of acting and real life, it promotes it promotes that.
This was your movie, Vega. You picked it. Had you seen it before? And what was kind of your, like, did you pick it because you've seen it and you loved it? Or, yeah, what were your thoughts?
Well, I picked it because it was a black and white movie. But no, I'd seen this. I think I've exclusively, or almost nearly exclusively, watched this movie on airplane flights outside of earlier to rewatch it for the purpose of this podcast. But yeah, no, the one of the previous times I had rewatched it, it was on a flight from, I believe, Atlanta to Dallas the few weeks after I graduated college. And that last semester, that last fall of 2022 was a really tumultuous time, all in all. But there was just such an immense time of everything was going 1,000 miles per hour, and then boom, I am. Oh, I mentioned this. I think I like volleyed it up, but I didn't follow through with actually getting the answer out. I don't know how many podcast episodes ago.
It was for Father Stew, because you were trying to relate it to the crash in Father Stew.
That's it. That's the one. Yeah, no. So for the audience at home, I got into a car accident. I had lost control of. So it was the day after I graduated college. I lost control of the vehicle that I was driving in the furthest most left lane, and then like I guess a blackout, and then know that I had hit the median, and then I flew across like 5 lanes, and then went underneath a semi, and then that turned around, and that was a whole other thing. Anyways, rough time, all in all. Generally, do not understand how I did make it out of that, but went from a very like borderline grind set, cannot stop, will not stop. Everything is like crashed in like year, to a forced, you cannot do anything and you will sleep. You won't rest, but you're gonna sleep a lot time period after that. So watching this movie, one of the that might have been my second or third time watching it on a plane from Atlanta to Dallas, really hit me that specific time. It hit me again this time, but it didn't, not quite the same as much as this, looking into these two people's lives and seeing how you know that he really genuinely does love and care for his nephew, and that you just, I think maybe my movie reviews are a little bit whatever, because I'd like to relate. I like to see myself in the art that other people create, or I like to at least try to see like some level of humanity to relate to in that. So like in that maybe not my first impression ever, but one of my impressions was just how beautifully it was able to kind of pull you into, at least for me, like some level of like deep anguish or deep like fear, like when the nephew runs away for a moment. Like I felt that kind of fear before, not quite for my nephew, but maybe for my cousin or for different relatives or that kind of thing. Or but I like there's just very visceral feelings that this movie, I think, the actors in this movie were able to portray. I won't go too much further into that right now, but it does. This movie does very much hit for me. I think it's truly something special.
Yeah, I did find that it was one of those movies that almost could have hit for me. Almost like if they had reworked a few things, it maybe could have really been one of those high-ranking movies for me that really moved me emotionally. And I will say, for it to become that movie is not to fix issues. What I'm trying to say is like sometimes I think movies try out certain things and they fail, and I'm like, oh, if they had landed the attempt with what they were trying to do, I really would have liked it. I will say was something that I really appreciate about Come On. As much as I might have been like, I don't love that choice or this or that, I don't think it was ever an execution issue. I really, really do believe the director. I mean, when you make a movie, there's always gonna be things you regret and wish differently. But I really think the director got a lot of what he wanted. So even though maybe the movie went in a different direction than I necessarily wanted it to go in, I really appreciate that I could feel while watching it that it was that the story was what the director wanted. It didn't feel like an attempt and then a flop. It felt like an attempting and a landing and a success, just maybe not quite in the direction I fully wanted it to go. But there were a lot of moments that I really were floored by and was impressed with, specifically the acting. I thought they did. It is so refreshing to see authentic, good, natural child acting. And I think Woody, I believe was his name. Yeah, Woody Norman, the child who played Jessie, did a phenomenal job, all in all. Also, something it's not enough to put it into the holy moments, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned it because I really was impressed with it. There are not enough movies out there that focus on a sibling dynamic. Just there's not enough. I'm always, when I'm writing scripts, constantly wanting to add in some type of sibling dynamic, especially for me personally. I have 6 siblings and I love all of them dearly, and it's been a big part of me growing up, kind of being a middle child. And sibling dynamics is just something that's not talked about in film, which I think is a shame. Also, uncle nephew dynamic, not really super ever talked about. So I just wanted to say I'm really happy this movie picked the relationships to be the vehicles for the story that it did. It could have been easily Johnny being the father to Jessie and Viva being the mother, and she leaves for some reason. Kind of like the movie Kramers versus Kramers. But I'm very happy they picked the dynamics they picked because I think it created a unique story and also isn't something you see very often. So I just really appreciate that from a writing standpoint.
Yeah, I was coming into this movie expecting something along the lines of Kramer versus Kramer or Manchester by the Sea, just based on the premise, and it ended up being very different from both, and a large part of it was just the relationships. I mean, with Manchester by the Sea, it's also a nephew uncle relationship, but in that case, both parents of the child have died. Whereas in this case, it's even more complicated, I guess. He has a father that's struggling deeply with mental illness, and that's the struggle, I guess the cross that they have to bear, to borrow a phrase from my own upbringing. But yeah, and Woody. I was about to say Woody Harrelson, but that's not right. What's Woody Norman?
Yeah, Woody Norman.
He was great. He was great. Very believable. And I have to believe too. I just have to believe that whenever they use child actors like this, I have to believe that a large part of the performance is improv, you know? Because how else are you going to get that out of a child, right? They're not going to sit down and memorize a ton of dialogue.
I will say, like, obviously I wasn't on scene and I haven't done enough background on the movie, and I don't even know if this information is out there, but I would bet money on some scenes were obviously improv and some scenes weren't. And I also feel like it was noticeable. There were certain key moments, like let's say when Johnny was going to bring Jesse to the airport to send him back to his mom because he just can't do it anymore. It's too hard. He's going to a different city. It's too much work. And Jesse wanting to kind of stay with his uncle, kind of needing him to support like this child being like, don't abandon me, pretends that his stomach hurts. So he has to get out of the taxi, go to the bathroom. He locks the door. And it basically is revealed, Jesse's stomach doesn't actually hurt. He just doesn't want to get on the airplane. That scene, while good, it was a good scene. That felt like one of those scenes that the director wrote and was like, hey, for story-wise, we actually really need you to say the lines how they're written. And I really don't think there were very many of them. There was only like 2 or 3 other scenes I could point to that was like, this feels like a moment where the director was like, hey, we wrote this. It needs to be said for the sake of the story. But like, I would say a good 80% of the scenes, again, wasn't there. I could be wrong, but 80% of the scenes really felt ad-libbed. Or, there's obviously a script and a general idea, but then they said, hey, just have this type of interaction. And they went with it. And I personally think the scenes that I believe to be ad-libbed were better and more authentic than the scenes that felt to me were probably based off the script and the child actor had to stick to the script.
I'm also really curious about the chemistry that the kid had with Joaquin Phoenix and how that was developed, because you could tell that they were probably close on and off set, right? Or the process of filming made them close. Something similar happened with Kramer versus Kramer. Dustin Hoffman and the child actor, he was the one that gave direction to the kid. And he was the one that really bonded with the child more than any other actor in the movie. And that was so that he could portray this believable relationship of like father and child. So I wonder what that looked like, behind the scenes.
Yeah, that is, that's a big part of the director trying to get those actors to have on-set chemistry. And for someone as young as a child, I feel like a lot of that on-set chemistry honestly comes from comfortability. I think, adult actors, comfortability is a big name of the game, but you've done it long enough. You're a professional. You can go into this room with maybe you've only done lines over Zoom or not at all. And, unfortunately, maybe you weren't able to rehearse for some reason. It's still your job to create that authentic kind of comfortability. But with children, it's way harder. Understandable. It's a child. So I think it's a big deal to be able to cultivate that relationship and comfortability. And you definitely see in the scenes where they're playing, like when they're like fake wrestling in bed, you can definitely see just how comfortable he is. So yeah, I do wonder how they're able to get that translated to screen.
Have you guys ever crashed out? It's like so hard. Not in a car necessarily, but just crashed out so hard that it just kind of changes you, like it forces you to, or at least like in that moment, it's like a, I don't know, like not a wake up call, but just like not necessarily tunnel vision, but like maybe you're going out for a run and it's raining and it's like something just big and emotional happened kind of thing. Y'all ever experienced anything kind of adjacent to that?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't know how the average human operates, but I feel like I try to be relatively in touch with how I've been doing emotionally and mentally and spiritually kind of throughout the day and throughout the weeks and months. But a big thing I've kind of been realizing just specifically in the context of a relationship is there's so much going on underneath the surface that if you don't have like daily, weekly, monthly check-ins with yourself, it starts to build up. And the reason I bring all this up is when I do have those kind of crash moments is when I feel like I just have stopped checking in with myself. How am I doing with the relationship? How am I doing with my health? How am I doing with X, Y, or Z? And then it starts to build and build and build. And you don't even realize it's building because you're no longer mentally checking in with yourself. And then all of a sudden it kind of just like comes all out in a moment. And sometimes it's not too messy. Sometimes it comes out because you kind of start to sit down and think about it. Like, oh, I've been really stressed because of these reasons. And then you adjust. Or sometimes it doesn't come out in the prettiest of moments. And like Vegas said, maybe you're on a run or maybe you're chopping wood. It is interesting how physical things, it's not like running's that hard. It's like chopping wood's that hard. But I do find like it's interesting how doing a physical thing can bring you to a certain level of frustration that will then kind of bring on that crashing moment of like the emotions crashing down on you. All that to be said, I can't think of a specific story.
Well, that's fine. Jeffrey, do you have anything? Also fine if you don't.
I think when COVID started, everyone was sent home. I'd spent about a month or two isolated in a mountain cabin, and I went there because my parents owned it, and it was a comfortable spot, many great memories associated with it. And I thought, well, I'm an introvert, and I enjoy being alone. I'm sure that this will be good for me, because it had good Wi-Fi. I didn't have that at like where I was staying prior, and I needed that for school. But then I went there, and I very quickly realized, despite my aversion to community, as it stood back then at least, I was still very much in need of community. And we are social creatures. We were meant to share with others our lives and our hearts and our minds. And me in particular, I just fell into a great depression, and I felt stuck there. And near the end of it, I don't know. I reached a breaking point where I called my parents, and I was sobbing, and I told them how I was feeling and how I'd felt trapped, and that I couldn't leave the cabin because I'd made a mess of it, but I did not have the motivation or the ability to fix it. And then that caused a further downward spiral. And eventually I was able to fix it with them on the phone. That it gave me the kick in the pants I needed, but I would say that whole period of time was a prolonged crash out, or perhaps the skidding of the vehicle that led to the crash.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Of course, I don't know if that at all touches what you had in mind or meant, but I'm also sick as fuck, and we can cut that if we need to.
No, I really 100% see how it connects with it feels like Vega was saying, this idea of like this crash, and Jeffrey, your story kind of relating it back to Johnny's, and I mean, I feel like you could connect it to all three, Johnny, Jessie, and Viva, this kind of like slow build up of this burnout that sometimes you don't even know where it starts. Specific like with Johnny, when he was on the phone with his sister Viva, and he was talking about like, was it me getting into your and Paul's marriage and screwing it up that ruined things? Was it my depression? Was it my girlfriend walking out on me? He's like, I don't really know when this happened. All I know is that I'm not in a good place. And he's very clearly been on this slow, like you were saying, Jeffrey, funnel down. And it wasn't until this child that stepped into his life. And something I love about this movie is there's so many movies where it's like childlike wonder and pure imagination and love opens your eyes to like the goodness in the world. That's like a very common trope in movies, which is great. But I love that this trope wasn't like, oh, here comes Jessie and his uncle Johnny's depressed, but Jesse's just a basket of butterflies, and he's so happy, and he sees the world through children eyes. It wasn't like that at all. Jessie was struggling just as much as Johnny, but it wasn't like their depression came together and helped each other. It was just like their views on the world. And what I really loved, it was almost like they let Jesse's character be mature enough to bounce ideas back and forth with an adult. And it wasn't like sitting down and having philosophical conversations. I mean, there were some of those, but it was much more just like hearing and seeing what the other person was doing would kind of impact the child Jessie and then impact the uncle Johnny. And it helped them to begin to, I think, first and foremost, understand that they were in that spiral. Like you were saying, Jeffrey, you needed to understand that in that cabin, it was not a good place for you. And then you had to reach out for help to your parents. And I think it was just like the presence of these two together and kind of their like, again, not like life is perfect. Don't worry, Uncle Johnny, everything's going to be great. But more of like just their disposition towards life, of their curiosity and questions, and maybe almost seeing like, man, my nephew's struggling. Who am I? Like, I can get over what I'm struggling with. And then even Jessie kind of seeing Johnny struggle. It almost like seeing each other struggle to help them get out of that funnel. So I 100% relates to the movie.
I think that so often we can have this patronizing attitude towards children. Like there's some completely different species, but it is a really valuable thing to realize that they are just small people. And when we become aware of that, we can look at them as we would look at a mirror, right? Sometimes we behave in ways that we don't understand. Sometimes kids behave in ways that they don't understand. They can be frustrating. We can be frustrating. And when we see that, I think it can teach us to um, give more grace to kids, to the adults in our lives, to ourselves, because we're all just confused, right? And there's a world of difference that separates a child from an adult, but also, you know, that world isn't as large as we might think.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. We were just talking about before we started recording the podcast how all the interviews with those children that Johnny was doing were real interviews. And I remember thinking during the movie, I was pretty convinced this seems like the type of movie that would do that. So I was pretty convinced they were real interviews. But I was also just a little dubious, but also impressed. I was like, if these are real interviews, it's impressive because like these are pretty young kids, and what they had to say, like, you could pick it apart and maybe say, oh, it's foolish or um, just isn't realistic. But that's not the point. The point is that they were having these thoughts and they were willing to present them, without embarrassment or criticism what other people had to say. And so I think it almost was my holy moment, but it wasn't quite. And we'll get that more into in a second when we talk about our holy moments. But I loved how they presented children, and they so clearly wanted to present children as not stupid, ignorant, foolish people, which is just one of my biggest pet peeves. And it's just like, not to get on a soapbox, but I don't know the perfect way to parent. I'm not a parent. There's a lot of different methods. Totally great. But parents that just like don't give their children room to like be thinking, intelligent, caring, emotion-filled people is such a sad thing to see. My favorite quote out of the entire movie was very early on in the film when Viva was talking to Jessie. Sorry, when Viva was talking to Johnny, and Johnny's like, "How is he doing?" And she's like, "Oh, he's doing great." Blah 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 blah. And she says, "He's a whole little person," and you can tell, like, man, just before my eyes, he's become a thinking human being, and it's such a disservice for us to be like, "Oh, well, you're a child, so you need to respect and be quiet," and not realize, hey, this child has so many thoughts. Last thing I'll say to that notion is I was watching, I think, an interview with Neil Grassman. Neil deGrasse
Tyson.
Thank you. Neil deGrasse Tyson. That's his name. And he was just talking about, like, look at children, look at kindergartners. They're asking questions that we stopped asking long ago. And sure, maybe you could say it's out of ignorance, but it's out of curiosity. They're asking, why does the earth spin? Why are there so many stars in the cosmos? Why do stars, like, why do they take shape like the constellations? Why are we breathing? Could you ask an adult? Could an adult answer, why are we breathing? Most of them couldn't. So it's just, they have this innate curiosity to them. That's so beautiful. And I think the film captured not only their innate curiosity, but children are a lot more intuitive and pick up on a lot more than I think adults give them credit for. So.
Oh, for sure. One of the notes that I wrote was, kids observe more than they let on. They catch on to more than we give them credit, and they form their own opinions on it. And that sticks with them into adulthood, right? Already these blank slates have been scribbled on, already they're forming an identity. And I believe that there is something to learn from everyone. And, if kids are people, as this movie posits, as, surely none of us disagree with, then we have to be humble and let ourselves learn from children sometimes, right? And we have to be humble and recognize, okay, we can ask kids these questions, and then we can hear them in earnest. We don't have to patronize to them all the time. We can just give them the space to talk.
Yeah. I think and I think there's a difference. Like, children are not adults cognitively on every level. They're not adults, 100%. But like, giving them that room I think that's so good for like children, not even education, but development. Giving children room to talk and like actually engage. Something I loved about this movie is Johnny would talk to Jessie. He would never talk down. he would always engage with him and meet him where he was at. And then honestly, where he met him, where he's at, better conversations than most adults can have. Not even joking, just genuinely interesting, intellectually driven conversations. And I just am so happy that I just kept expecting Johnny at some point to blow up and be like, "You're so annoying," and I'm happy they didn't shy away from that. Like Viva and Johnny both vented on the phone a lot of the times. Like, it is exhausting to be a parent. I love him so much, but some of the things he does is so annoying, which is true. I mean, I'm sure if you're a parent, I'm sure that's true. But I love that when he was in the room with him, he engaged with him. It wasn't like, "Oh, that's so silly. Why would you want to be an orphan?" And obviously, I want a psychologist to tell me what's going on there, because that seems weird. But the point is, he engaged with him, and it wasn't stooping down to his level. It engaged with him kind of where he was at, and it was very mature. And I love that.
Yeah, and he does show some hesitation at like some of the concepts that whole role play entails. And he's like, "Why are you wanting to do this? Why are you asking me to do this of you? Isn't this strange?" And you can tell that there's a part of him that does sort of interpret this as like, this is just a weird kid thing. But then we learn later that, unbeknownst to Johnny, his sister had an abortion at some point, and Jessie knew. And this was likely some way of like grappling with that knowledge. And I'm not making any comments, any value statements on that topic. That's not what this is about. But that role play and giving Jessie that space to explore these questions and grapple with these feelings, giving him space and taking him seriously in that moment was important.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I did not put two. I mean, you're probably so right. I didn't put two and two together at all, that he was probably acting out and grappling with the idea of like, I could have had a sibling, but I don't. And, how does like a 9-year-old, they don't know really right from wrong, yada, yada. So they're just trying to figure out.
And thinking about like, oh, I am a replacement.
Yeah. Am I just a substitute?
Yeah. It didn't feel, I don't know. It felt important to me that they would throw that idea out there that she had had an abortion. It felt like there was connective tissue.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. That makes sense.
Did that soundtrack hit or what?
Yeah, no, that soundtrack was phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed it. Definitely will be listening to it in the future. I was saying before the podcast started, I don't know if any of you at home agree with me at all, but ever so slightly, and maybe it was because it was in black and white, but ever so slightly, some of the tunes kind of gave a horror-esque film. Not like classic horror, not like classic slasher, but like just some type of like classic A24 unnerving, disturbing vibe. But that could just be me.
Thank you for your thoughts on that, Mr. Lirio. Yeah, I would also love to know what our other co-host, Jeffrey Nichols, has to say about the music. If the music did have any effect on it whatsoever. Who knows if it did?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I really enjoyed the music. And I think I did, have the thought of, oh, like, these are bops. They fit the scene really well. Beyond that, I didn't really have many. It just wasn't where my focus was, personally. No, it did nothing but improve the film.
Yeah, I would agree with Jeffrey. It's one of those things where I was like, I genuinely was impressed by the soundtrack. There was, I think, one moment where it felt like the soundtrack helped the story, but all in all, it wasn't one of those movies that my focus was on the soundtrack and the soundtrack was improving the story. It just was good. So yeah, I don't have anything like Jeffrey. I feel like I don't have anything specific to say to it. Otherwise, then go watch the movie and listen to the soundtrack because it was good.
Like, I think, well, whether you like the movie or not, whether like the movie like links with you or not, I think just listening to the soundtrack of Come On is worth the experience in and of itself. That is actually, I think that's why I watched the movie. It's because the soundtrack was so good.
Which was your favorite track?
I think it's called like Who's Watching After Jessie. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that, yeah, it's Who's Taking Care of Jessie. That one was great. I think my top 3 was Who's Taking Care of Jessie. You'll see a lot of bad, but it's beautiful. And Be Funny When You Can. The last track of the soundtrack.
I will say the one time that the soundtrack really was like, oh, well, like I said, I can't remember for sure, but I think there was one moment where the music was really hitting me during an emotional scene, but I don't remember what that was. But the one moment I do remember kind of mentally taking a note was when we enter the second act and Jessie Johnny is officially taking. Gosh, they need to pick different names. Jessie and Johnny are too close to being similar. Not the point of the story. The point of the story is when Johnny officially takes Jessie to New York, and they kind of do the smash cut to the classic aerial shot of New York, and it's like New York. They picked a really upbeat, kind of fast, energetic song. And up until then, the movie's kind of been slow, been meditative, and it does a really good job of giving you into the headspace of the fast, bustling city of New York that little Jessie was about to go explore for the first time in his life. And I do remember thinking that was a really great song and good choice to transition us into a new act of the movie, but also preparing us kind of emotionally what's to come, kind of changing up the tempo and the pacing.
There's actually like so much more I would like to talk about this movie for. Man, I really wish, like, not to be the same, like, we should start a podcast thing, epidemic of young adults. But what if we started this? It would have been so nice to have started this back at college, and so we could have just kept on talking and talking and talking and talking.
Yeah, just being in the
all
same
asleep
place.
in, like Nathaniel's like living room, and then
Yeah.
there's like a big pot of some on the stove, and then I just get up in the middle of the night and eat a little bit of that and walk back over.
I would love
would
that. Hear me out, Jeffrey. I mean, you guys just drive every Sunday to my house.
I like that idea. And the thing on the stove can be pho. I want
Yeah,
pho.
if you guys drive to my house, I'll make you dinner every Sunday when you come over.
Sounds like a deal.
But I mean, obviously, I know we got to get her sooner rather than later. But I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your. I would love to keep talking about.
Yeah, no, I would just say in that part just to say, like, I guess to the audience, I there's so much like that. I think, regardless of you think, I guess if anyone thinks that that's, yeah, oh yeah, there's just so much to this movie that regardless if you think it's like, was this a good movie, was this a bad movie, was it entertaining? I think just there's so much like to pick out, to talk about, and to just like, well, maybe it wasn't like, was it like maybe it would have been worth a $20 ticket to go and see in theaters? Maybe not, but I think it just is like, regardless of entertainment value for me, it just, I think it's there's so many things that I think it does really special. Is it like the best plot heavy movie ever? No, but I don't think it was like really trying to be. So like I could sit here for hours just talking about this, so many things that happen, and which as opposed to like other movies which might just have like similar ideas going on. Like I just don't think it like might just show it in the same way because it just well, I'll just say my little last point and then we could move on. But something, or if you guys have a response to it, we can go with that. But I think something that this film did well for me is that I think we were talking about, we were talking about this in the little pre-show, a little pre-talk before we actually started recording. But I would really love, or I really do love films and just different like mediums or different things that kind of feel as not necessarily as close to life as ever, but just like feel like how real life might be. And when I watched this movie for the first time, it just hit me because of that. It just felt incredibly familiar of this, like, hey, maybe you're not like doing 100% ever. And then maybe somebody enters your life that you might love, but you don't necessarily always, you're not like equipped necessarily to 100% interact in the best way possible with that person. But that doesn't mean you don't try. And that doesn't mean you don't like can't grow into that kind of person. But there's just so much, there was just so much that I think it did well that I would like to talk eons more about. But we just don't have the time because time is, I don't know, money or something like that. I'm not landing that sentence properly. But all of this to say, I thought it was beautiful. But we do have a little thing that we do on this podcast, which kind of centers around the entire name, called What Was Our Holy Moment in This Film? I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Jeffrey and Nathaniel.
Yeah, I would say that just the interplay of real interviews with fantastic performances was my holy moment, because hearing from these real kids about their experiences and the things that they've learned and their insights, coupled with watching Johnny's perspective shift as he spends time with this kid who's had a very unique set of experiences. I don't know. It just shows you that kids are so full of potential and full of hidden insight, right? And personality. And I don't know. Life's a beautiful thing. A person is a beautiful thing. Um, and it's evident from, you know, I guess from the very beginning, from the get-go. It's a beautiful thing to witness someone, growing more and more into their own. Just seeing kids as a microcosm of what we experience as adults.
Yeah. I have two, maybe three thoughts on that. The first being is, I don't know, audience, DM us, email us if you can think of an example, or my guests can give me an example if they can think of one. But I don't know if I've ever seen a movie integrate real interviews into a fiction movie in the same style as the fiction movie. So obviously there are documentaries, there are like biopics, and then I feel like I've seen fiction movies that will integrate real interviews, but they'll break the style of the movie. Like they'll kind of break the fourth wall with the real interview. This was like the first time I've seen real interviews with real people, but then like do it in a way that makes it feel like it's fake. Like when you're watching the movie, you think this character Johnny is going to these places and talking to actors. So I really like that they don't break the fourth wall by being like, these are real students. I thought that was really awesome. The second thing I was going to say is, Jeffrey, while you were talking, because you're in a closet with your shirts framed your head and it made it look like you're wearing like one of those big pharaoh hats. So yeah, like right there, it looks like you're wearing a big pharaoh hat. If you guys want to see this, go to YouTube.
Yeah.
You can see the video of Jeffrey dying slowly, being consumed by his allergies. And then thirdly, last thing, as I ever so closely inch, and let me stress inch, towards being a father one day, it's just crazy thinking about I get why people become obsessed or fearful or all the things about with their children. It's like, it is literally a little you. Like you have made like DNA, like part of you made this person, and then this person is just a conglomerate of your DNA and your spouse's DNA, and then like your ancestry, but mostly your DNA and your spouse's DNA. And it's just crazy to sit there and watch them get interests and hobbies and have thoughts and feelings. And it's just like, because Jeffrey, what you said, looking in a mirror, it really is like looking in a little mirror, and watching them grow up has to be crazy. So, yeah, check back in like 7 years on the Holy Moment podcast, and I'm sure I can talk this topic a little bit more when I have a kid. But we'll keep you posted.
Wait, was that your holy moment?
Oh, sorry. No, that was just me talking about Jeffrey's. Sorry, my holy moment. I was going to go the route of what I talked about earlier, which was, I really kind of like what Jeffrey was saying. I really, really appreciated the maturity of the children in this world. And again, there's so many movies where it's just like the innocence of children wins over the evil in someone's heart. Like that's great. Love it. Nothing wrong with those types of story. But I appreciate it was much more like, hey, children deal with crap just like adults deal with crap. Children have insight, thoughts, and feelings just like adults have thoughts and feelings. Don't discredit them just because they're kids. That was going to be my holy moment. But I just felt like other movies have done that before for me. Maybe this movie did it really well, but there's something else I wanted to talk about that I thought was really interesting. But my holy moment is also almost a complaint, but it's not a complaint. So this is what it is. After finishing this movie, I watched it with my fiance, and we were both kind of talking about like, hey, that was good. It didn't ultimately stick the landing for us, and we were kind of dissecting why that was. And I came to this conclusion. And I kind of talked about this earlier in the podcast, but this was a movie that was trying to set up payoffs for like a really big emotional climax with Jessie and Johnny and Vivian. It failed at that level. If it was like a classic 3-act story structure, introduce our characters, introduce a conflict, get to the end, have a big meltdown, resolve the conflict, the end, I would say it's failed at that level. And naturally, those are the types of stories that I find entertaining. Like it's every story you've ever seen in theaters ever. It's like your classic Steven Spielberg, any movie that Tom Hanks has kind of been in. I like those types of movies. But when I thought about it more, I realized this movie it didn't set up to do the jump and then fail. It didn't set up to do that at all. And I started to realize this was much more of, it wasn't quite a tone poem, but it was a more of a collage of authentic scenes of characters interacting with emotions they didn't understand. And then I personally didn't feel like we ever fully quite understood why any character was going through what they're going through. You know, we got a lot. We got a lot of pieces of why they might be feeling that, uh, what happened in their past to make them feel that. And then two, we did not get any direct resolution to any of their issues. Like, I guess maybe the dad's coming home. Maybe Johnny feels a little bit better after hanging out with, maybe Jessie feels a little bit better after hanging out with Johnny, and vice versa, but nothing's like concluded. So I would say my holy moment is the fact that even though this wasn't the type of structure that would make me find a movie really entertaining, I really appreciated the director making this collage of like these really real human feeling scenes, and not spoon feeding us all the backstory, and then also not necessarily giving us a resolution. I think I wanted to say this, what Vega was talking about earlier, the reason for me personally, when Vega, you were saying, I have so much I want to talk about. It's a movie that keeps giving. It's a movie that so many ideas. And for me, I think the reason why is because most movies kind of give you the setup and they give you the payoff. There's a finite amount to talk about. This movie doesn't really give you setups. It gives you a million emotions and scenarios for why people are feeling that way, and they never fully conclude on it. So you're able to interpret it in any way imaginable. And that's so many jumping off points for so many great conversations. And I think that's really cool. Unfortunately, does that mean it was the most entertaining movie to me? Absolutely not. But it's a movie that I respect. And out of that respect, I did find enjoyment in it. So that would be my holy moment. This idea of collages of scenes, of these kind of like emotional based scenes that don't have this amazing setup or payoff, but let you kind of meander in the thoughts of what these characters are going through and why and what's to come and how it got there.
No, I like that holy moment. Yeah, I feel like if this story were more classically structured, the way to get the big blowout scene would be to involve the dad more, make him more of a character.
We barely even touched on the guy.
I
It's
know.
almost like,
Yeah.
we kind of treated him like the film did. He's kind of there.
And that was so fascinating too. So yeah, like you said, Vega, it really is a movie that keeps giving. Sorry, Jeffrey, not to interrupt you.
No, that's kind of my thought is the focus wasn't on him. It was about Johnny and Viv and Jessie. And, that's what the director wanted to tell. Not even a story, but a snapshot.
Yeah. Yep. I like that snapshot of you didn't get everything before and you don't get everything after, but you can be so in this moment with them.
Well, I don't have a holy moment.
Kind of seems like one of these movies to you, and maybe there's just a cop out. It seems like one of these movies, Vega, that like the movie in itself could kind of be a holy moment, because it is kind of like, it's not some crazy movie that's breaking all, like reinventing film or anything, but it is different. And I feel like this definitely seems like a movie up your alley, and I can see just the very conceptualization of this movie could be holy to you.
Well, like, you know what? I was kind of joking about the not having a holy moment thing, but maybe I'm going to stick with that. I like I was saying earlier, like the reason of why the movie like struck a chord with me so heavily, like why it works the way it works, and then another part of it is I just very much enjoy and consume a lot of documentary work, and like specifically a lot of like shorts. And that opening, that was so reminiscent of like a lot of things that I've seen, and I really like a lot of shorts, the way that like people cut interviews together, and not, I mean, okay, like interviews are cut together. What a great point about documentaries, but it just was like, it just was so like, it was done in a way that very much, like, am I being a little bit, I really don't like the word I'm going to use, but am I being like a little bit manipulated? Probably, sure. That's where my emotions are going. But is it working? Yes. For me, yes. So like, they were just, maybe the holy moment for me isn't as much this like one particular scene or moment or action of the film, but I think it's just kind of how the whole thing works. Because life doesn't necessarily, like, say this was cut to be like more of a traditional drama, would have moved a lot faster there, or like at least a lot, like there would have been, I think, a significant less room to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this film had so much time, and maybe too much time sometimes, to breathe between moments and between like how some things are. And then some things might feel really fast, but they might take like 8 minutes to live out the whole scene. It's so I think how it was edited might be my holy moment. The way of how much breathing room and the kind of pacing that the editor and the director and all the people who were involved in that particular coming of decision, I think that is it for me. Because that, I think, in a really beautiful way reflects life. Because life isn't just like the hit marks of like, well, this happened and this happened and this happened, like in such a like large emotional hits as much as it is. You'll go to work day in and day out and day in and day out and day in and day out. And one day might just be like sucky, and one day you might have this huge breakthrough moment after being terrible with your nephew, and then you guys are able to come closer, and then just those kind of things, I think, made it work so well. Probably was a little bit more rambling than needed, but I this film was incredibly beautiful through and through for me. So that's about where I would leave it. But what do you guys, does this film deserve a rating? Are we just going to the number system for this one, or are we using the actual quote, the holy moment, end quote rating system?
Yeah, no, of course this film deserves a signature holy moment podcast rating. The question is, what are we going to give it?
I can start. I think I have an idea of what I want. So one of our ratings is prudish grandma, and the connotation of prudish grandma might be negative, but it's actually a step above medium, right? And so sometimes, prudish grandma doesn't do justice to my enjoyment of a film. So I'm going to play a little fast and loose here, since it's the higher end of prudish grandma for me, and I'll explain why. I'll call her church grandma.
Aw.
And yeah, church grandma.
I like church grandma.
And my reason for going with this rating is because, church grandma, she has her routine, and, she reads her Bible, she sings her hymns, she goes to church, she knows exactly what she wants, and she executes. And then she gets spiritual fulfillment from that, right? And we can talk to church grandma, and she'll give us good advice, and we go away from that interaction feeling fulfilled, right? And maybe not everything church grandma says resonates with us, but you leave that interaction with church grandma happy that you were able to see her one more time before she inevitably kicks the bucket, probably pretty soon.
So we can have that interview with her.
Yes.
Aw.
Yes.
No, I like that. That's very nice. Let's see my rating. I'll just really quick for you guys at home that don't know about a rating system. Our rating system is degrees away from holiness. When we say holiness, we don't mean religious. We mean holy is the idea of capturing something holy in film. Something that the writers, directors, cast, they work towards something magnificent and capturing the story in the best context for that film. So we have 7 rankings, and Jeffrey gave it to spot number 4, the prudish grandma / I guess now the church grandma. I'm torn.
I would say, sorry.
No, you're good.
Now I would say that church grandma, prudish grandma are the same, but like prudish grandma is in the lower end.
Okay. Yeah. So it's like a spectrum.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I would say I'm torn because I really was going to give it a lower-ish, like a medium rating. But I really think after our conversations and me just reflecting on the movie with my fiance, gosh, I think I'm going to give it Creato Adamus, which is our second highest rating. Just a little bit of backstory on that one. Creato Adamus is the Latin name for the creation of Adam. I'm sure if you don't actually know what that photo is, you probably do. It's the painting of Adam and God reaching out their fingers to touch, and holiness is what happens when people touch God. So the idea is it's so close to holiness, but it's not quite there. And I just think after really I think what the linchpin of this was for me, coming to terms with the fact that the director was, I personally believe, like I love the words that Vega or Jeffrey said, snapshot. And Vega, kind of your ramble of your holy moment, I like the idea, like you were saying, like it's this day in, day out. We don't always get all these amazing setups and these amazing payoffs in real life, but it's just a snapshot of maybe not these these day in and day outs. And the fact that I think the director was going for that and actually ended up nailing it in a sense that maybe, again, doesn't make the most entertaining film for me, but it still makes for a film that I really enjoy and a film that I really respect the idea and conception behind. So I think I'm actually going to give it Kriyto Damus because it really was doing something unique in my mind, doing it with purpose, and really executing it pretty dang well.
I'm not going to give some super lengthy expression to why I think this, because I think you could probably glean from somewhere else in all of my ramblings in this episode. But I think personally, I really think this film for me might just land that at Creative Adamus. Was it the most perfect thing in the world? Was it like the holy moment? No, it had so many beautiful, beautiful things to say and did it, I think, very excellently. But it just not like, it's not the holy moment. Or it just isn't like hitting that way, So.
Whoa. Looks like Jeffrey's a hater.
It's a really interesting thing where when it comes to the two rankings of Drunken Monk and Prudish Grandma, yes, one is technically higher in the list, but I feel like, for me at least, they describe less the quality as in value of the film and more the quality as in character of the film.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that I enjoyed this as Church Grandma more than I would a lot of Drunken Monks.
That's what's nice about the ranking system. It's very subjective.
Yeah.
And maybe people at home hate that, but that's our ranking system. So too bad. But I think, Jeffrey, you have a hat for us. I do hear.
I do have a hat. Let's hope none of the what do you call it? Movies have fallen out unduly.
Sounds like once again Jeffrey's trying to set up the
Dua
hat.
Lipa-ly?
Duolingo.
Dua Lipa-ly. All right, drum roll, please. Okay, let's see what this
Let
one
me
is.
guess. I think it's going to be Vega's pick, Chronicles.
Well, I think it's also going to be Vega's pick, but I'm not going to make any specific guesses. All right. I'm actually really excited for this one. I started watching this on a plane immediately after I'd watched Amelie on a plane, but having been burned by Amelie, I was getting uneasy vibes from the first few minutes of this movie, which I'd later learned is unwarranted.
I think it's G4.
Is it The Lighthouse?
No, it's After Sun. After Sun.
Oh, well, I didn't even know that was. Whose pick is that? I didn't even know that was in the hat.
I believe it's Vega's, right?
That might just be mine.
Do you know?
Yeah.
Do you know what category Vega? If not, I have it pulled.
I don't know.
It is
Maybe
Vega's.
it doesn't matter.
It's wild card.
Wild card, yeah. Okay, y'all ready to see? Y'all ready to see Paul Mescal make you cry? Make me cry, at least.
I am so ready for that.
I'm excited. Heck yeah. I haven't cried, I don't think, to any of these movies we've reviewed so far. So let's see if this does it.
All right.
Well, guys, join us next Monday when we review After Sun. It's on Netflix, so go watch it. Sit down with your popcorn, sit down with your cat. Don't think about being lonely. Turn the TV on.
Well, to Nathaniel's dismay of what I'm about to say, you probably know where to find us. Some podcast listening apps. If you're listening to us right now, you could probably listen to us on other random podcast apps. You don't need the list, but where we do exist socially is Instagram.com, YouTube for little clips and the long takes of these things, Facebook, and I don't know if we've exercised yet. At least I haven't. Maybe I need to, but X, formerly known as Twitter, and there's probably a few other things, but go back to the former episode, listen to those, then you could figure out where we all exist. But
we make you do homework here on the Holy Moment podcast.
I'm very grateful for everyone who got this far into the episode. And I really hope that you guys out there are watching these with us. That would really warm my heart. And I really would like to know what you guys think about these kind of episodes, or these like just movies like this, because these movies like sit with me, and like if there's things like this that sit with you and that talk to you and that speak to you and just make you cry a little bit, or might make you appreciate some things that in a way that you don't really do anymore, or that you just kind of forgot that you could. I'd love to hear about that, and I'm sure my co-host would as well. And we, that's why we do all of this. But this was the Holy Moment podcast. I hope you guys had a great time listening. See you guys on the next one while we talk about Charlotte Wells, I believe's After Sun. Thank you.